My name is Katie Klotz. I'm RoboNation's Community Manager, and I'm here today with Professor Carolyn Judge, who is here to talk to us about how she became a naval architect. Thank you so much for joining us today, Carolyn. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I want to share my story of sort of how I traveled from wanting to be an engineer to deciding to do naval architecture to eventually becoming a faculty professor of naval architecture. So when I went off to college, I had a plan. I knew exactly what I was going to do. My plan was to go into engineering so that I could have a job when I finished, and a well-paying job at that. I really liked math and science. And so I figured that would be obvious. And in particular, I was enamored with the aerospace industry. So I wanted to go design fighter jets, right? Like that seemed like the coolest thing I could do. And I managed while I was in college to score like my absolute dream internship. So I did an internship with Boeing in their defense department. And I thought that this was going to be great because the history of interns was that they would be offered a job upon graduation. And so I was like locked into this dream that I had of working in the aerospace industry and being an engineer. And I went off to Boeing and I hated it. I really, really did. I didn't like anything about the culture. It sort of dawned on me that even the mission of designing these really cool jets, so few people got to use them. They were so limited in their impact and sort of how they benefited society that I sort of started thinking about at the end of my career when I looked back, what did I really want to have accomplished? And this just didn't seem like it was it anymore. And I really kind of had a huge crisis of like, what do I do now? I mean, I thought I had it all figured out. And so I I actually seriously started thinking maybe I'll go be a librarian. Like my mother was a librarian. I thought that would be a great job. And but in the process of doing a lot of thinking, I would wander the halls of the Boeing office space, and there was this cubicle that had all these really cool boat pictures in it. In particular, pictures of boats that were flying. So these were boats that literally were not in the water. They were up above the water, flying through on these little struts. And I just thought that was the most fascinating thing I'd ever seen. Well, one day the guy who's owned the cubicle kind of caught me ogling these pictures, and he was really friendly. We fell into a conversation, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, that was the coolest project he had worked on for Boeing. Like in the 70s, he had gotten to this project where Boeing had designed these underwater wings for these Navy boats to basically get them up out of the water, out of the waves, so that they could have a nice smooth ride." And be used for things like targeting because they wouldn't be bounced around with the waves and they would be able to go super, super fast. And he just thought that was the coolest project he'd ever gotten to work on the whole time he was at Boeing. And we got talking about boats and ships, and all of a sudden he goes, it sounds like you really want to be a naval architect. And I was like, what's a naval architect? I'd never heard of it before. I didn't know it was a thing. And so he kind of explained that it was about ship design and working with boats, and it was all about this whole field of maritime design. And I thought it sounded so neat. I thought, well, okay, I want to work in this industry, but I have a degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering. I need to go to graduate school so I can like get the connections I need to find a job so I can work on boats. And back in the day, this was before the internet. I had to go to the library and get out a little pamphlet that told me what schools, taught naval architecture and what kind of degrees you could get and what kind of background you needed and all this stuff. And I went back to college and I applied to go to graduate school. And my plan had been to get a degree, a master's degree, and then immediately start working in industry. And I had no interest in getting a PhD for a couple of reasons. One was that I didn't think I was smart enough to get a PhD. Like you had to be really smart to get a PhD, and I just felt like I was not smart enough to do that. And then also that I didn't like school. Like it was just something that I was trying to get through, and I didn't feel like I wanted to spend the rest of my entire existence in school because that didn't seem like as much fun as getting to actually go out and do work and work on boats. But I did want to get into this new field, and that meant I needed to go back to school to get a degree in naval architecture. And in the process of applying for graduate school, I was able to get a Navy scholarship that paid for 3 years of my graduate work. And because of that, I was put on the PhD track when I got to graduate school. And essentially, it was the path of least resistance. I just stayed in school. I got my master's and I kept going. I was engaged at that point to somebody who was getting his PhD, and he was staying in school, and it just seemed easier to keep doing that. And I discovered that I really liked learning, and I liked that once I got interested in a topic and was learning about things that I thought were fascinating, I enjoyed school. I got excited about the classes I could take. I took classes in all sorts of things that were really applied and interesting that I felt like I could really have the time and energy to dive into, because I was only taking a couple classes. I wasn't taking 5 classes. I discovered that I really liked research, that the idea of just kind of trying to figure stuff out that nobody knew how to do was satisfying, frustrating, but also satisfying. And so I just discovered it was a completely different mode of being in school, and I didn't mind staying there. And so the 3 years ended, and I realized, like, I didn't finish my PhD, and I needed to get more funding. So I had to go through another application. I applied for more scholarships. I got another year, and I thought, okay, I'm not going through that again. That was really hard. I've got to finish my PhD. So I pushed really hard, and in that 4th year, I finished up my PhD, and I got my degree, and I had a PhD in naval architecture and marine engineering. And I looked at my husband and I was like, I have no idea what I want to do with this. Like, I hadn't given it any thought. I hadn't planned on getting it. I didn't think I wanted to be a professor, because I still hadn't quite gotten around to the idea that maybe academia was a place I could survive or thrive. But I didn't know what else to do with my PhD. Um, and so I went back to, my husband still hadn't graduated. He had not felt the same kind of pressure. So I got a job working for a different professor, doing experimental work. And I discovered that that was even more fun than what I had been doing before, actually getting to put stuff in water, see what it did, make measurements, make sense of the measurements, come up with new cool ways to measure things that we wanted to measure. And it was so much fun. And in the process of doing that, they needed someone to teach a summer lab class in the mechanical engineering department. And I was like, well, I could use the extra money. I'll sign up to do that. Seems like it would be fun. And I got into the classroom, and it changed everything. I had never had a job that I would have done for free before I did that job. The classroom, the getting to interact with the students, the working through how to help them understand what we were talking about, and seeing them make the connections and be able to, use those connections to do the assignments that we were working on. It was just, it was night and day in terms of, I actually looked forward to going into work. I would spend extra time outside of what I needed to make sure everything was ready for the next day. But my love was naval architecture. I, more than anything, wanted to be teaching about the thing that I thought was so cool, which was boats. And so I looked around again. This was quite a number of years since I had gotten my little pamphlet, from the library in Seattle, and looked around to see what schools offered it. And there still were not very many. In fact, there were significantly fewer schools teaching naval architecture than when I had gone to school. And I got really lucky in having the opportunity to go to the Naval Academy and teach naval architecture, and some courses in mechanical engineering as well. And in particular, do research with students in the tank and do experimental stuff, where I got to do, the fun stuff, and then teach students to get excited and thrilled about it at the same time. You learn an awful lot about the aspect of the field that you're learning about, but then when you have to teach it, you have to teach all of the topics. And so I learned that by teaching, I learned much more, and I got an even better understanding of naval architecture. Every new topic was an opportunity to learn more about this thing that I thought was just so cool. And so, it just ended up being a great fit, and I have gotten more and more excited about the field. I often will tell students, when you're thinking about engineering and what kind of field you might want to go into, something like mechanical engineering is great because it has broad applicability. You learn about projects and you can apply those ideas to all sorts of different fields. But naval architecture is one application with all forms of engineering applied to it. So if you like boats, you get to learn about electrical engineering on boats. You learn about mechanical engineering on boats. You learn about the stability and the actual boat specific stuff. And so it kind of depends on where you love. And so for me, even the stuff that as an undergraduate, I couldn't stand, when I see how it applies to boats, I get excited about it. And I love teaching it because it makes me learn. Um, and then the last little bit that I would say is just that it's a community of people who all think boats are cool and every aspect of boats are cool. So it's so much fun for me to get in professional groups or whatever, and we start talking about boats and seeing that everyone around me is as excited and thrilled about this. Such a cool area. There's so many interesting things. They go below the water. They go on top of the water. They fly above the water, right? Some of them go really fast. Some of them carry immense amounts of stuff. You think about the cruise ships that are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and yet, they can do all this stuff. There's just a never-ending, fascinating world of expansion and new ideas and new concepts. Autonomy, like what RoboNation does, the idea that you are going to take these incredibly complex systems and have some autonomous system make all of those complex decisions that humans do on the boat, and make sure that it's capable of doing very, very complex missions. I just think that it is so cool. So I love being a professor. I think that that's one of the things. I would be a professor even if it wasn't in naval architecture, but I love naval architecture. I think that's everything about boats is just fun and great. And I just am incredibly lucky that through chance, through this moment of deciding my plan in life was just thrown out the window and I didn't know what to do, I ended up on this track that put me right where I want to be.
That is fantastic. Thank you so, so much. We really appreciate your time and all of your insights. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.